America. And Julian Epstein was definitely right earlier when he said that these students are most of them don't even know why they're demonstrating. That's the sad commentary about it. But I'm telling you, trust me on this. There are some instigators that needed these two groups to clash. There are instigators who don't want peaceful demonstrations. They need this scene. Hamas is filming what we are now here watching on UCLA campus, and they're going to use that as propaganda against the United States of America.
Yeah, and Julian, let me bring you back in here. This, I mean, obviously, all of this was sparked by international conflict, but this has major domestic political implications, doesn't it? And I'm still surprised we have not heard stronger language coming from the White House. Do you think we now will and should, Julian?
We must hear it, and the left, I mean, the conservatives and the Republican Party have had a great deal of moral clarity, and the left, I'm sorry to say, has had a great deal of moral confusion. You know, when I was at the Judiciary Committee working for the Democrats, I remember multiple times when black folks and brown folks and gay folks were systematically targeted. And the Democrats, the leadership, would all rise up in unison and say we should invoke 242 of Title 18, which is the criminal civil rights statutes, which allow the Justice Department to prosecute violations of civil rights. They said we should use 1983, which is the civil provision, which allows victims to go into court and sue civilly. You know, back in 1957, when segregationists tried to keep black students away from schools after Brown v. Board of Education, Dwight Eisenhower ordered in the 82nd Airborne. And it is puzzling to me in the same way that when Israel is faced with a 9/11, and Israel being a country of 10 million people in a sea of 500 million in neighboring countries, many of whom are pledged their destruction, Israel, in the same way Israel's questioned about whether it has its right to defend itself, it now seems that the Democrats are not willing to stand up to what I think can only be characterized as the racism on the left directed at Jews, and will not do what they did. As I cited a number of things that they could have done. They could invoke Title VI, they could go after funding. And the fact that the Democratic Party does not take a morally clear position on this domestic, what is essentially domestic terrorism at this point. This is criminal behavior, I think is not only shameful from a moral point of view, but dumb from a political point of view. You know, I speak to Jews every day, Jewish Americans every day, who have always, throughout their life, voted Democrats. And to a T, I hear many, if not most of them, saying that they will not vote for Joe Biden, and this is the reason. And, you know, you're seeing a hemorrhaging right now in the Democratic Party of working class black, working class brown, and even Asian voters who are leaving because they don't like the fact that the activist left, the sort of the DEI left, has so commandeered the party in a way that just, you know, makes no common sense and sort of is offensive to common sense.
Right.
I'll finish on this point, John.
Julian, oh, sorry. Yes, go on. So, sorry. Excuse me.
Well, so what I think the president should do is he should have an Oval Office address, and he should say what is at stake in the Mideast, which is the only democracy that protects the rights of religious minorities, of ethnic minorities. You know, most Arabs living in Israel would say they would never want to live under a regime that was controlled by Hamas, ever. And to make clear what the stakes are in terms of Western civilization in Israel. But equally importantly, what are the stakes with all of this anti-Semitism that is erupting on college campuses, and to make clear that he has all of the federal law enforcement capacity needed in order to put this to an end, and that it won't be tolerated. And that's the kind of leadership, that's the kind of Winston Churchill-like leadership that I would like to see from a Democratic Party that I've grown up in, and that I'm sorry to say is failing this test right now.
But Julian, is it particularly difficult to have moral clarity when you're trying to appeal to different slices of your base in different geographic areas of the country? Does moral clarity become something of a blur when you allow domestic politics to intervene, shall we say?
Jonathan, it's exactly the opposite. When you have a complicated political situation with different factions, it's when you need moral clarity. It's easy to have moral clarity when it's easy. It's hard to, moral clarity is called for. The test of moral clarity is when it's difficult. And that's what we learned from Winston Churchill. When people thought, when many people thought that Western Europe wanted to appease Hitler, and that there was some of that feeling in Great Britain during World War II, Winston Churchill got up and he explained to the people what the stakes were, what the moral issues were. I mean, I think the reason that you have seen some cratering of support for Israel is because we have not seen the president do what he did exactly after Israel was attacked on about October 10th, 11th, when he gave the speech explaining why this was a fight for basic decency, why this was a fight against Nazism, why this was a fight for Western values, why this was a fight against genocidal, maniacal terrorists. And when he made that speech on October 7th, that was very powerful. We need that right now. And the test, again, of moral clarity is what you do when things are difficult. And that's exactly, and if the president did that, he would pick up, he might lose a couple of votes in Dearborn, but he would pick up so many votes in the center, and he would do what people want, which is in troubled times, people want a strong leader, strong. Somebody who will get up in the Oval Office and say, this is right and this is wrong, and I'm standing with what's right. Damn the torpedoes.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, Julian. You do get the impression that there are voices within the Democratic Party saying you need to not offend this group or appease this group, and what you need is somebody who rises above that and shows moral clarity. As you rightly say, it'll be interesting to see over the next 12 hours or so what, if anything, we hear from President Biden and the White House, because what we are witnessing now is pretty extraordinary. And Joe Cardinale, you're still on the phone with us. Julian talks about moral clarity. You need clarity of decision-making as well among elected officials, among law enforcement leaders, and it doesn't appear that we have any clarity of decision-making here in Los Angeles right now, Joe.
No, absolutely. I agree with Julian. You know, we just don't have a moral compass in this country. We really don't. And it's sad because when you think back to the days that Julian's talking about, you know, I mean, go back just to Ronald Reagan's days with you know, Tip O'Neill over there, when they would reach across it, where there was bipartisan issues addressed, you know, where everybody could come together and say, this is what's best for the country, not for one party. All right. And that's what's happening right now. And I have to tell you, you know, I don't want to throw my campaign in here, but I'm going to tell you what my thing is. I think my thing is, don't vote your party, vote common sense. Vote for common sense. If these things are working for you right now, then fine, you know, then, you know, stick what you think. But this is not working for any side. None of this across this country. I mean, you talk about 10 million people over in Israel. We've had that many people come across the border right now, and that's another issue that's going to come out. And some of these people are at these campuses right now that cross the border. There's no doubt in my mind about that. All right, I went through 9/11. I know exactly what happened prior to that. And what's happening right now with everybody that's over here, the sleeper cells that are here, is nothing to laugh about. And it's something that has to be taken serious. But they're confusing so many different issues at the same time that they're getting their point across from across the country, you know, across the world, without even being here. All right, these are their proxies right now, and they're accomplishing every dirty deed they want to do through them. All right, so colleges are no longer higher, you know, institutes of higher learning. They're not. All right, they're nothing but sleeper cells and cells for teaching the things that they do teach. And if they wouldn't teach the proper history, as Julian said, they would know that what they're fighting for right now is wrong, all right? But they don't have that moral compass. That's the problem.
Ted Williams still with us too. Ted, we were just, as Joe and Julian were talking there, we were just watching more pretty intense brawls going on among the two groups of protesters there. And I still, as we pull out to a wide shot there, Ted, there's not a single LAPD vehicle that I can see. I'm still being told by our affiliate reporters on the ground there that there is not an officer in sight. That might be a black and white in the aerial shot there, but if they are, they're sitting in the vehicle and not doing anything. I just do not get how this is a scene on a campus, a public university campus, Ted, in the United States of America at this point in time. How can it be allowed to continue, Ted?
Jonathan, you're asking the $10 million question. I can tell you in all of the years, over 40 years as a lawyer and being in law enforcement, I have never witnessed what I am witnessing here tonight. And that is the lawlessness that is taking place where there are absolutely no law enforcement officers whatsoever. Somebody needs to pick up the phone and call the governor of the state of California and tell the governor that one of your mayors in California is not doing her job. And damn it, governor, do your job. Send in the National Guard. Joe and Julian are right. When you look at this campus here tonight, somebody is going to be seriously harmed. This cannot continue. When you, as I look at this, and as I've said over and over without being redundant, this is a national embarrassment. We are going to wake up tomorrow morning, and we're going to see what happened on the campus at UCLA. And we're going to be talking about this in many, many forums. And one of the things we're going to be saying is that in America, what we are witnessing here tonight should never happen. And somebody with some responsibility is going to have to say something. Julian is right. At this stage, the commander-in-chief needs to get on the air and talk to the American people, because I can tell you what we are witnessing here tonight, and as shocking as it is, it's going to continue. It's going to mushroom. It's going to just over and over be in our faces, and Americans are going to get hurt. And Julian, you're right. There shouldn't be a single Jewish person in America who should feel intimidated and that they cannot walk around as Americans themselves. This is just unacceptable.
And Julian, let me bring you back in here. Your historical analysis of all of this is so fascinating, and it strikes me that as we watch this tonight, the counter protests, and I know from talking to some people from the organization here in LA, Bulletproof Israel, which has done a lot of work, both helping Israelis and also protecting the Jewish community here, that they have said repeatedly to me personally and publicly over the last few weeks and days in particular, when we've seen these protests and Jewish students being so fearful on campus, they have said, we will not allow history to repeat itself. I want to get your thoughts on that, Julian, given your great historical perspective on these issues.
Well, first of all, thank you for that, Jonathan. And Ted, thank you for your comments about not a single Jewish student should feel threatened. I think we can say that about any student of any ethnicity or background, and we are brothers in that sentiment. in terms of history repeating itself, I mean, you can go back to 3,500 years of Jews being despised and persecuted, uh, not just in the Mideast, but through the pogroms in Russia, in Czechoslovakia, and Poland, and you can go through the ages. And this is sort of just a continuation of that. And if you look at where anti-Semitism really raised its ugly head, not just in Nazi Germany, but elsewhere throughout history, particularly through the pogroms, it found much of its support amongst university professors and amongst university students. So this does feel very, very, reminiscent of anybody that has studied the history of Jewish persecution. And again, Jews have been persecuted more than any group throughout the history of mankind, or humankind, I guess you have to say these days. So there's that. Then secondly, there is the point that every time the Jews have tried to make peace with, with the Arabs, I mean, there really weren't Palestinians per se. There's never been a Palestinian nation. There's never been a Palestinian currency. There's never been a Palestinian president. Mostly Palestinians were just referred to as Arabs until 1964, when the Soviets got together with Yasser Arafat and started to make sort of the Palestinian cause a thing. But look, every time the Jews have tried to make peace, whether it was 37, 48,
okay, are we going right to the top of the hour, Linda?
They have been rebuffed. And when they left Gaza, when Israel left Gaza in 2005, rather than the Palestinians and their leadership building a productive, they had the crown jewel real estate on the bank of the Mediterranean. I mean, they could have turned it into another Dubai. They could have built an incredibly successful, productive economy. But what they did with not just their resources, but all of the international resources that they have stole more international resources and aid than any group ever in the history of donor countries and rebuilding. Rather than building a productive economy, what they did was they turned it into a war machine. And then in 86, 87, when Hamas is sort of formally assembled, their assembly calls, their charter calls for the annihilation of the Jews. So the bottom line here is, if the Jews were to lay down their arms today, they would be slaughtered, all of them, in Israel.
Yeah.
If Hamas laid down its arms today, there would be peace. And that's the difference. And as you watch these protests that you've had on your air for months now, every single Jewish protest that I've seen, or pro-Israel protest, has been peaceful. And increasingly, all of these pro-Hamas protests have been turning violent and increasingly violative of the laws. So it seems to me that there just isn't there shouldn't be that much moral confusion of anybody that studies the history here, anybody who understands how the Palestinian-Israel conflict came into being. Palestine, this area was occupied by the Ottomans for 400 years. And then before that, the Druze. And then before that, the Assyrians. And you go down the line. What these protesters are doing today is they are aligning themselves with the most anti-progressive, racist, bigoted, Nazi-like ideology that first wants to kill the Jews, but then guess what? Guess who else they're coming for? They're coming for the Sunni Arabs. They're coming for Christians. They're coming for anybody they consider to be a heretic, an apostate, gay or lesbian, or anybody that is different from their sort of theocratic ideology. And that is the cause, the Nazi-like cause, that this group of protesters, the students who just seem to be completely ignorant of the basic facts here, this is who they are aligning themselves with. And that's when we need a Winston Churchill-like figure to say, this is what is right and this is what is wrong, and this is a fight. This is a fight about the survival of civilization itself, and we need a leader that can come out and say that, and we have been lacking that in the last few months.
Yeah, you mentioned history, Julian, and I was in Gaza in 2005 when, as you point out, Israel handed Gaza back to the Palestinians completely, withdrew all the Israeli settlements that were in the Gaza Strip, and within a year or so, Hamas was elected. They could have run Gaza in any way they wanted. They could have used all the billions of dollars of aid that were pouring in there to help the people. But as we now know, horrifically, from October 7th, what they did was build tunnels and prepare for a war and prepare to instigate the horrific events of October 7th, which have led to where we are now. It's extraordinary that so many of these young people that we're looking at now on the campus of UCLA, Julian, if you ask them the basic questions of history with the Palestinians and the Israelis, they can't answer any of them. They've learned a couple of things now. We were asking them in the first few weeks after October 7th if they knew what they meant when they said from the river to the sea. They've learned the rote answer of that. But you delve any deeper in history with them, Julian, and you're absolutely right. Ignorance is part of the problem here, I think.
Oh, try asking them, Jonathan, who controlled Gaza and who controlled the West Bank before 1967. And they won't be able to answer that question. And the truth is that Jordan controlled the West Bank before 67, and Egypt controlled Gaza after until 67 as well. And the reason that they no longer controlled them, or they didn't after 67, was because Israel was attacked from multiple sides, by Jordan, by Syria, by Egypt, and Israel won that war. And then even when Israel gave the land back, even when Israel offered Gaza back in 2005, rather than, as you just pointed out, rather than turning it into a productive economy on behalf of Palestinians, what they did was they turned it into a war encampment, a military encampment aimed at doing nothing but eradicating Israel because of their racist hatred for Jews. And that's what the history is. And and when Israel was willing to give Gaza back to Egypt, Egypt didn't want it. Egypt didn't want to deal with the headache at that point, right? And so Israel has offered Gaza. Israel has offered the West Bank, and in each case, in every single case, they have been rebuffed. You ask any of these protesters just the basic facts, the simple, easy facts about this history, and they know nothing about it.
Julian Epstein. Julian, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you on what is a sad day for the United States as we watch this, what has essentially been a riot on the campus of one of the major UC universities, UCLA here in LA. I cannot thank you enough for the historical perspective and analysis you've given us in these early hours of the morning, Julian. Thank you. And let me put a button on this with Ted Williams as well. Ted, I believe you're still with us. It's still, let's put a law enforcement button on this, Ted, as we wrap up this hour of our coverage. Extraordinary to me that's now at least 2 hours into what has essentially been a riot on this campus, not a single LAPD officer, Ted.
Yes, it is extraordinary, and it is an embarrassment that California will probably never live down of what we are seeing here tonight. I have to believe that in the next hour or so, they're gonna have to send in law enforcement. Young kids are being hurt. Young kids in America are being hurt. And so this is very, very troubling, very troubling, Jonathan. Jonathan, you and I have covered things together. And I can tell you, I don't think you and I could say we've ever covered something so embarrassing to the United States of America as we are witnessing here on the campus of UCLA tonight, with law enforcement not being there to do their job, the job that law enforcement would love to do, but some administrator, probably a mayor, is holding them back from going on that campus and doing their job.
Yeah, and Ted, you think we will see them in the next hour or so? Just I've got about 30 seconds, Ted. Do you think they have to come in within the next hours? Because it seems to me if they were going to come in, they would have done it already.
Jonathan, I think and I'm hoping and praying that they do come in within the next hour or so. I would have to believe that somebody somewhere in California with some authority is watching these two groups are clashing, and they know that this is wrong. This is lawlessness and lawlessness. They're going to have to come in. I would have to believe that within another hour, law enforcement will be there.
Okay, Ted Williams, thank you. It has been a pleasure being with you over the last couple of hours of this extraordinary breaking news that we have been watching. Ted Williams, thank you so much. And what you are looking at live now, pictures from our Fox affiliate here in Los Angeles, KTTV Channel 11, of what has been nothing short of a riot on the campus of UCLA. Remember, UCLA, a public university, one of the blue ribbon universities of the UC system. Pro-Palestinian protesters took up residence on that campus several days ago, and tonight, as Passover ended, we saw counter-protesters go on to the university campus, and what we have watched for 2 hours now is ongoing brawls between the two sides. Wooden poles have been used to attack each other as the protesters clashed. Firecrackers have been thrown into the center of crowds. Pepper spray has been sprayed in the faces of protesters on both sides. It has been little short of utter lawlessness, and what we have not seen at any point over the last 2 hours is a single officer from the Los Angeles Police Department. There is chaos on the campus. There is no law enforcement presence. For continuing coverage now, I hand it over to Fox and Friends First.
A Fox News alert happening right now. Violence erupting on the UCLA campus between pro-Palestinian protesters and pro-Israel counter-protesters. According to local reports, pro-Israel protesters tried to dismantle that pro-Palestinian encampment overnight, throwing fireworks and even reportedly using pepper or bear spray. Despite this chaos, there is no police presence on campus. You are watching Fox and Friends First on this Wednesday morning. I'm Carly Shimkin.
Early edition here at 4 a.m. on the East Coast, 1 a.m. Pacific. I am Todd Pyro. The violence happening right now at UCLA, just one of many developing situations on West Coast campuses overnight. Brooke Singman here with the very latest. Brooke.
Yeah, guys, this morning marks day 7 of these chaotic anti-Israel protests. Brawls erupting throughout the encampment where students have been staked out. A nearby resident is calling out the school for allowing this violence to go on for so long. Watch.
There's people getting hurt, there are people getting injured, and the police officers left their post. They were here, they left. The security has abandoned this encampment, this riot. Okay, you hung up on me. I called earlier, and you hung up on me. You just hung up on me again. I came down here to see what's going on, and I cannot believe what I'm seeing. I'm looking at people, violence. Look at this. They're throwing things at each other. They're pepper spraying each other. How are they allowed to have weapons on campus?
Wild scene there. The school is finally speaking up about that, saying, quote, the established encampment is unlawful and violates university policy. Law enforcement is prepared to arrest individuals in accordance with applicable law. Police and SWAT officers also moving into the University of Arizona overnight as protesters remain barricaded on the campus. And Portland State University's campus is closed for the second straight day as protesters continue to occupy the school's library. And the protests are moving beyond campuses. Today in California, anti-Israel protesters plan several May Day protests in the Bay Area, including plans to disrupt the Port of Oakland. Guys.
All right, Brooke Saman live for us. Brooke, thank you so much. Let's bring in NYPD Sergeant Joseph Imperatrice, who has served 13 years in law enforcement and is, of course, the founder of Blue Lives Matter NYC. Joe, good morning to you. I mean, this scene out of UCLA is total anarchy. What is your reaction to it?
This is no different than the 2020 riots. This is no different than Occupy Wall Street. This is a lot of paid agitators, paid protesters that go out there. They rile up the mentally ill, the people that are misinformed, and this is what they do. They cause chaos and cause fear.
So what do we need to see right now from Mayor Bass there in Los Angeles, Governor Gavin Newsom, Joe Biden? Because I'm looking at this situation, Joe, and comparing it to what we saw in Columbia and here in New York City, this looks way worse at this point, and this seems to me it necessitates a National Guard presence. When you have two warring factions at this point, pro-Israel, anti-Israel, going after each other, at this point, this is bordering on significant conflict where somebody's going to get hurt, and I see that and I say National Guard time. What say you, Joseph?
This is an embarrassment to America. They need to have a full force of both the military and law enforcement officials to go in there to end it, to lock people up, but not just lock people up, keep them in jail. Just like January 6th, they went out there, they kept people in jail for prolonged periods of time. This is the only way this is going to stop across this nation. A slap on the wrist, a summons is not going to stop anything. They'll go right back out there and continue the chaos.
Okay, so we just got a statement from LA Mayor Karen Bass. It reads in part, the mayor has spoken to Chancellor Block and Chief Choi. LAPD is responding immediately to Chancellor Block's request for support on campus. So that request for LAPD support has finally come in, Joe, 2 hours and 15 minutes into this thing. I mean, we're seeing pepper spray being used, bear spray, those orange police cones being thrown at people. One person has already been injured that we know of, had to be taken away. What took so long?
This is people that don't know what they're doing. They're lucky someone hasn't been killed yet, you know. And then what we have to understand is go a step further. From my law enforcement, professional mind, you got to worry about a real person going in there, a terrorist act, and having a bomb, starting an active shooter situation. This can get out of hand very quickly. I don't understand why people are going, and when I say people, law enforcement officials are going on the news and giving up play-by-play. Just do the damn job. Just send the cops in. Just save people. Just lock people up. Stop going out there and making this a spectacle. That's the problem we're having. They got to go and get the job done. Once again, as a police officer, when you see people walking around with masks on their face, dressed in black, this is going back to pre-COVID. Those people are up to no good. This has nothing to do with Israel and Palestine. It's about going out there. It's about pushing forward an agenda, causing chaos and havoc, and screaming almost like a child out of control, saying, "I want, whatever I want now." It's got to stop. This is an embarrassment.
Joseph, to your point, we call that a tell in poker. You see the people in the mask, you see them with weapons. That should be a sign to the administration at these schools that something is afoot and it is not good yet. In the case of UCLA, it's not like you didn't see this coming. We saw the protests here in New York City, Columbia, NYU, throughout the East Coast, and even in California over the course of the last couple of weeks. So why did it get to this point at UCLA? Were they not prepared for this? Did they not see this about to happen? Did they have their head in the sand?
This is about people showing their cards a little bit. This is the Democrat Party that they don't want to go against, that they don't want to say, hey, we have to fix this because they're going to be going against the bigger machine. Let me take my cop hat off a minute. Just watching this as a father, there's no way in hell I would want to spend $80,000 a year to send my kid to school to deal with this crap. I'd rather him do a trade or get into some kind of a business. This is just a display to the world of, hey, maybe you should think twice before sending your kids to these radical and liberal establishments.
So, Joe, there were a lot of questions as to why police were not on campus, despite the fact that this has now been going on for over 2 hours. Did the LAPD have to wait for the officials at UCLA to call them into the scene? Were they waiting for that phone call? And also, now that it's been given, now that police have been given the green light to come in, what's that going to look like?
Yes, if it's private property, police cannot just go on there. Then what we're not showing also is how many areas are barricaded. Do these people block entrances and exits and egresses? You know, we don't know that, which is a good possibility. If they're coordinated and set up tents like this and somehow got plywood, what do you think they did to the entrances and exits? So, you know, it's very dangerous because you don't know what you're going into. There's possible weapons, there's drugs, there's pepper spray possibly, there's bottles being thrown. This is not a simple situation, but once again, this is a dropping of the ball from the judicial system, dropping of the ball from campus officials, dropping from the ball from straight from the White House. Where is the White House on this? They should be on every news channel right now at 4 in the morning condemning these actions and saying enough is enough and putting the world and the nation on notice, saying we will pull in the National Guard. We will work with every law enforcement agency to get this crap over with. But where are they? They're silent, and that's what scares me.
Joseph, I got to correct you on one thing. You said this is a private institution. It is a public institution. So I read that to say LAPD should have been on campus the first moment of unrest. It's not like they need to, quote unquote, be called in like they did at Columbia, which is a private university. UCLA exists for the people of California. So when the people of California and their health and safety is at risk, the LAPD can be there in a heartbeat. But Carly just read that statement that came down at 4:03 East Coast time, 1:03 West Coast time, that the chancellor there at UCLA working with the mayor to send in the police. It's abhorrent that it has waited until this point. But bigger picture, Joe, step back for a moment. Why do all these incidents, these chaotic scenes, seem to get out of control when it comes to blue states, whereas in red states, say for UT Austin, which is a liberal bastion within a very red state, they seem to get these things under control lickety-split. The first moment of unrest, they make a big statement, they send in a police presence, and you know what, Joseph? It's over. You don't see this. Why?
Because they're prepared for it, Todd. They would have had intel knowing that a situation like this was going to happen. They would have had police on standby. They would have barriers up already. They didn't do it, and it gets out of control, and these individuals are taking advantage of that. They know the police aren't there. Now, think about it, too. What is it, 12, 1 o'clock over in that area? We don't know if they had police officers coming off duty, if they just have their low manning right now. Think about that. Maybe there's only a couple sector cars out there that if they go in there, it's going to create an even bigger problem and a situation that may hurt police officers. But you have to think, this is going around all across the nation. There's intel officers. They had to know that there was going to be a protest. They had to know that they were going to have thousands of people on campus. So they got caught with their pants down, and it's really disgusting.
I mean, this is a situation is completely out of control, and you could tell over the past 2+ hours, it just grew and grew in terms of aggression and chaos. And now police are walking into a situation that could be much more dangerous for them than if it was dealt with right when it first started. And if you want to, back to the summer of 2020, Joe, I mean, a lot of people were talking about wanting to defund the police. If you want to know what a lack of police presence looks like, you're looking at it right now on the campus of UCLA. So bring us into the mind of a police officer, Joe, and tell us what they're thinking about. They get the phone call that they have to go into this really chaotic situation. Are they wearing riot gear? What's going through their mind? How do they handle it?
Well, it depends. Were they prepared for it? Look at New York City and the NYPD last night. They were prepared for it. They had officers in riot gear. They had officers surrounding the area. They were ready to be called in at a moment's notice. The question is the LAPD ready for this? Did they prepare for it? Did they have officers on standby? Did they bring in their SWAT units? That's all the mentality you're going to have, because a normal sector car with 2 cops, you can't go in there. Those 2 cops will be held captive. They'll get the hell beat out of them. They may lose their lives. You cannot go in there just as 1 or 2 officers. It's not a smart tactic.
Joseph Imperatrice, we appreciate your insight on this morning. With that, let's bring in Fox News correspondent Jonathan Hunt live in Los Angeles. And Jonathan, amazing coverage before we picked it up from you. And at about 6 o'clock Pacific time last night, 9 o'clock East Coast time, I received a statement from UCLA Chancellor Gene Block, because I am an alum of UCLA. And the statement was a little touchy-feely, saying, you know, we have a situation on campus we're monitoring. We have security that's going to be keeping the situation calm. What the heck happened in the intervening 10 hours to the scenes of chaos we're seeing on our screen right now?
Yeah, complete chaos is exactly what happened, Todd. It was extraordinary. We came on air at around 10 p.m. Pacific time, so just about 3 hours ago, thinking we were going to be anchoring our continuing coverage of what had happened at Columbia University in New York. Within an hour, I started getting word from my wife, actually, who is a reporter with the local Fox affiliate here, KTTV, who she was on campus there at UCLA, that things were getting tense. And then we took their live pictures, and thank you to the Fox affiliate KTTV for that, that we've depended on for the last couple of hours. And it was extraordinary what we saw. This group of counter-protesters coming on to the campus, facing off with the pro-Palestinian protesters who've been there for days, and absolute chaos and violence breaking out. We watched, for instance, as firecrackers were thrown into crowds of people, exploding in plumes of smoke. We watched as people attacked each other with long wooden poles. We watched as people pepper sprayed each other in the face. We watched as people brawled in the center of one of the blue ribbon universities of the UC system, UCLA. What we did not see, and still have not seen at any point, was a single officer from the Los Angeles Police Department. Frankly, it boggles the mind that they have not been there. At one point, I saw 2 LA police vehicles in one of the aerial shots provided by the KTTV chopper. They were on the edge of the campus, about 100 yards from the violence that was unfolding. They drove away from that position. Now, LAPD for sure is an understaffed, under-resourced organization at the moment. But we were talking to many law enforcement officials over the last couple of hours, former and current, and they all said it is completely incomprehensible that the LAPD did not move in quicker when violence was simply breaking out across this university campus. Quite extraordinary scenes of brawls, as you can see right there on the screen right now. These were the scenes that played out over hours, and not a single law enforcement personnel. And now we hear this statement from Mayor Karen Bass. The mayor has spoken to Chancellor Jean Block, and Police Chief Dominic Choi, who is acting Police Chief of the LAPD. And the quote here, LAPD is responding immediately to Chancellor Block's request for support on campus. Well, they're not responding immediately. They still have not responded. There is still not a single police officer there that we can see 14 minutes after that statement was released and some 2.5 hours after the violence broke out. It is an extraordinary embarrassment for the city of Los Angeles, for UCLA, and frankly, guys, I think for the United States. It's just incomprehensible that this is being allowed to happen on the campus of a major public university. Todd and Carly.
Yeah, Jonathan, you're right. I mean, just looking at these images, it's stunning. This doesn't look like America. This doesn't look like the United States. This looks like a third world uprising. It's clearly a crisis in leadership, as you were just addressing. And you have to wonder where the breakdown took place, who's to blame. I mean, who's responsible for this, and why wasn't the call made to get this under control sooner?
Yeah, and from what I understand from some of the current and former law enforcement officials we have been talking to, is that Police Chief Dominic Choi would have been waiting for an order from Mayor Karen Bass to go in, or she may have been saying don't go in. Now, I can't confirm that hierarchy and how that works, because it would seem to me that the LAPD would act immediately when there is lawlessness in a public place. And again, UCLA is a public university. So we'd have to get clarity, and hopefully we will get that later, if these officials, if Mayor Karen Bass faces the cameras at some point later today, because it's extraordinary. I don't know if it's a failure of leadership, a failure of decision-making, but certainly, Carly, it is absolutely a failure that this is being allowed to happen on this campus. And and the violence we've seen at least one person taken away in an ambulance. I've seen other people over the last couple of hours helped out of the area, clearly hurt. A lot of people suffering, being pepper sprayed, and as you watch again there, firecrackers just thrown into crowds. It is absolutely stunning to me what we are watching. As I say, we thought we would be covering all night the ramifications from the NYPD's textbook operation at Columbia University, and instead we have been watching a complete failure of action on the part of any law enforcement organization here in Los Angeles, and these scenes of utter campus chaos at UCLA, Carly and Todd.
Jonathan, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but to set the scene and the contrast between Columbia. Columbia is a school behind bars, for lack of a better phrase. UCLA, unless they've added bars in the 20 years since I've been there, is an open campus. And just to set the geography scene for you, to the right of campus, multi-million-dollar homes literally across the street from a street called Charles E. Young Drive. And then as you go to the south of the UCLA campus, that's the city, or the village, if you will, of Westwood. Is there a concern, based upon what you're hearing, that these protests could spread to the residential area, to the village of Westwood?
We haven't seen any indications that any of this is moving off campus, but you're absolutely right in terms of the geography, Todd. It is a campus where you almost can't tell the end of the campus and the start of the normal residential area. You just walk and suddenly you're on campus or you're off campus. So it is completely and utterly open, which is also another reason why it is so extraordinary that the LAPD didn't move on to it. There are no gates, as you say, to close as there are at Columbia. There is nothing to stop anybody, clearly, as we have seen, walking onto that campus, and there is nothing to stop the LAPD. There's nothing to slow down the LAPD except decision-making, and that is the only thing that has allowed these completely extraordinary scenes we're looking at right now to play out tonight.
Jonathan, I mean, it really is an incredible juxtaposition when you look at the scenes between Columbia and New York and UCLA and Los Angeles, where police were finally called into Columbia and they cleared those protesters out without incident in under 2 hours. And then you see what's unfolding at UCLA, no police presence there, and you're looking on your screen right now at the chaos that is ensuing. I mean, think about the juxtaposition and what that says about law enforcement, leadership, being able to make this call. Yeah, your thoughts.
And I think, Carly, there's a lot of frustration in the Jewish community here in LA. I've been speaking to people on both sides, obviously, over the past few days. And what members of the Jewish community have seen is Jewish students prevented from moving freely on the campus, so many Jewish students being simply very fearful. Even those who were not scared have been very badly inconvenienced. They've been blocked from simple freedom of movement on a public university. So I think what you've seen tonight is frustration. And remember, Tuesday night was the end of Passover. I don't think that is coincidental. And I think you just saw frustration boiling over. And a lot of members of the Jewish community, there are members, for instance, of a group called Bulletproof Israel here, which has done great work helping the people of Israel and escorting people of the Jewish faith who have been scared just to walk to synagogue on a Friday night. Bulletproof Israel, I know, has put out a call via social media today for anybody who wanted to walk onto the campus of UCLA and feel safe, they would escort them on. I don't know that Bulletproof Israel members are on that campus, but I do know that a lot of very frustrated members of the Jewish community feel that they had to make a stand tonight.
That's a really good point. And I guess you could say, you know, to these the leadership at these universities, if you allow these protests to take place for days and days on end, I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Somebody's going to get frustrated and do something like this. So, Jonathan, just for clarity's sake, and maybe there is no answer to this just yet, but Whose job is it to call police in? I'm sure that the police officer, the guy in uniform, sees these scenes and wants to go in, wants to get this situation under control because people's lives on both sides are at risk here. Would it be the chief of police? Would it be the mayor? Whose job is it?
Yeah, well, obviously, I think you're absolutely right, Carly, that members of the Los Angeles Police Department, the officers who work on the streets of L.A. every day and every night and put their lives on the line for all of us, would want to be there enforcing the law and preventing this violence from breaking out. Their marching orders would come certainly from the police chief, the acting police chief, Dominic Choi. There seems to be some confusion as to whether the police chief would have to get a direct order from Mayor Karen Bass. It would appear to me that if there is lawlessness, then you don't wait for an order from the mayor every time a riot breaks out. If this was happening on the streets in Westwood, as Todd was just saying, just a couple of 100 yards away, the police would be stopping it immediately. They're just not going on because it's a university and because it's supposedly this bastion of free speech. This is nothing to do with free speech. This is lawlessness and violence, and it is really, I say again, incomprehensible that the LAPD has not gone in there for whatever reason and according to whoever's decision-making is ultimately at the top of this chain.
Not even a couple 100 yards.
Calmed down in some respect. You can see projectiles being thrown there from inside the encampment to those who are
and more of these people will retreat. But, for the time being, the violence is continuing, scuffles continue to break out, flying objects are continue to be thrown on both sides of that barricade, and there is no sign still of law enforcement.
You see one person trying to get people to calm down, got his hands up there, please stop. That's the body language that he's putting out there. Is this a faculty member, perhaps? Is this somebody from the faculty at UCLA trying to get people to stop? We don't know. But this is the first person I've seen tonight trying to get people to stop.
Yeah.
And he's not wearing a uniform. He's got a beanie and some jeans.
He's trying. He's even talking. He's talking to both sides, trying to create a little bit of a truce here, at least a little bit of a. Oh man, look at that! I mean, that's so again, the same characters that are interjecting here and continuing to keep the fight going. That's what we keep seeing, is the same people involved in these various fights. But now more weapons being used here, even as that lone individual tries to create some distance, tries to, play a neutral role here. But it's just too late, quite frankly. I mean, what we're seeing here is just a continued escalation. The only thing that might be a saving grace, as I mentioned earlier, is that it seems like the crowd on the left is slowly dissipated over the last half hour, but there's still a large number of them, at least 100 by my count.
Can you imagine being a student on the campus of UCLA who's trying to study, or at this point trying to sleep, and they're stuck hearing and dealing with this? There have been helicopters, our helicopters up above, you're in it, other media helicopters plus police helicopters that have been over this scene now for 2 hours or more. And to have to deal with that commotion and ruckus while you're trying to concentrate and trying to get the education that you and or your parents have paid good money for, and having to contend with all of this. It's really, it's hard to imagine, and I would bet there are a lot of people who are pretty upset at what is happening right now, because it would be very hard to concentrate on what you need to do when you're dealing or hearing this, and you're not glued to your computer, your TV set, watching all this happen.
Yeah, I should just warn you, Mark, as we hold this shot right here, we're going to try and keep the camera on this largest group on the left side there as we start to pull away. Unfortunately, it's time for us to refuel up here in Air 7 HD, so we're going to head back to Van Nuys. We've got our second helicopter being prepared at the airport right now. We're going to continue our coverage here, but we're going to try and hold this shot temporarily as we start to pull back into the San Fernando Valley for fuel, and we'll hopefully be back here in a few. But right now, all eyes on the center of the UCLA campus as some more CH.
All right, more Highway Patrol, California Highway Patrol arriving on campus. And as Air 7 HD begins to leave the scene, we will take a break here for a moment. Hopefully things will improve, and we'll have better information to give you as the night wears on here in West Los Angeles, where, again, unrest has been taking place for the better part of 2.5 hours now on the campus of UCLA. You see some officers there gathering. Now you see more of them. More officers putting on their riot gear. And these would be, are these LA police officers? Yes, this is LAPD.
LAPD right there.
Along with UCPD. More units coming
Wilshire
in.
Division units, it looks like. We've got UCLA and CHP, a much larger contingent with these CHP officers are putting on full riot gear as these officers finally prepare to enter the picture here and make their way over to the quad. So we're just getting our last glimpse here as we head back for fuel, but we wanted to get you that shot because we saw a large number of black and whites pulling into this discrete parking lot not too far away from the quad. They are suiting up and getting ready to go in.
All right, Chris Christie in Air 7 HD, we thank you very much for your live coverage of this as we continue to see what is happening on the campus of UCLA, where the violence has erupted and continues to erupt. Now police officers arriving in force, in numbers, and we will see the results of that as we will continue our coverage a little bit later. I'm Mark Brown along with Chris Christie reporting live. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
our Eagles. That was and is our chant, and now we've fulfilled that with one, and we're going to have a bunch more. Girls are Eagles!
So we're aware that from 10:50 this evening, counter protesters showed up outside of the encampment, aiming to disrupt it. This is nothing new. We've seen since the encampment went up on Thursday that counter protesters have tried to access the encampment and have tried to disrupt their sleep. We know as well that they set off fireworks and that they threw tear gas at the encampment, and the encampment responded by holding up their barricades and throwing back canisters that had been thrown in.
Is it too simplistic to say it's a pro-Israeli counter-protest?
We know very little about the counter-protesters. Lots of them have shown up heavily masked or wearing balaclavas as well. We know that in recent evenings this week, many of the counter-protesters that have shown up overnight have showed up with Israeli flags and have promised to come back. But we also know that they were at various points chanting USA this evening as well. So we just don't know who they are.
But this is the first time you've seen it turn violent in this way.
Yeah, there's been some pushing and shoving in past evenings. We know that paramedics were called, but it's the first time that we've seen anything like what we're seeing on the scale this evening. It's also the first time this evening that campus security, there are about 30 hired security people on the site, have withdrawn from separating the two sides from each other and allowed campus barriers to be knocked down.
Why do you think they've done that?
So, well, what we're seeing is more violence than we've seen in any other evening. We've seen tear gas thrown, obviously, as well on the UCLA campus. There's a complicated relationship with police. There's a very small campus police force, but historically, the LA City Police need to be invited onto the campus to be allowed to come onto campus. That might be one of the things that has been causing the delay this evening. We know now that UCLA has requested a wider police presence, but they had previously stated that they weren't going to do so proactively and were only going to do so in reaction to significant violence on campus.
Why do they have to be invited onto campus when it's a public university? Sorry, I might be getting too deep in the law, but I'm just wondering.
Yeah, so the University of California actually has its own police force. That's actually a state police force. So there's the University of California Police Force that's got roughly 30 officers who usually patrol the campus. They were called to the scene. They arrived at the scene today, and they left very, very shortly afterwards. It was only one squad car with about 4 policemen. So the reason that LAPD have to be invited in is because it's considered state rather than city land.
Okay, so that has happened tonight, according to the mayor's office. You would have seen what happened at Columbia University yesterday. There was a very strong show of force, wasn't there, by the NYPD in protective gear, and it's pretty decisive. Do you expect to see a similar situation in LA, or would it be handled slightly differently there from what you know about the police?
It's very difficult for us to say at the moment because we haven't had LAPD come and approach the encampment yet. All the statements we've had from the university have said that people inside the encampment would only be arrested if they were obstructing police or paramedics. However, the university earlier today threatened to arrest any outside actors who came to campus. We believe that many of the counter-protesters who are on campus now and who are throwing those fireworks aren't members of the university community as well, so that could feature into the police response.
But when violence erupts like what we're looking at right now, and the tensions are clearly very high, surely the police need to be involved just to prevent, you know, some sort of, you know, any sort of escalation. When situations are tense like this, they can blow up very easily, even if it's not intentional.
Yeah, so we know that campus security have been requesting a police presence for hours now, nearly 3 hours, that is. A statement we got from inside the campus said that no police were on the scene and actually questioned why no police were on the scene as well.
It's a sensitive situation, isn't it? Because in broad terms, I know it's not entirely clear to you who the counter-protesters are. Maybe they're outside groups, maybe they're, you know, they were chanting US slogans, but also we're seeing pro-Israeli flags as well. You know, there's an optic here, isn't there, that there's a pro-Palestinian group in an encampment that people are trying to evict. So just the optics here are going to have a very damaging and divisive effect.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. We've seen over the last couple of days that there have been competing protests and counter-protests, some of which have been organized within the university community. From what we understand, the majority of the people inside the encampment are students and professors, and it has been a divisive issue on campus as well. We expect that that will continue into the next couple of days, irrespective of what happens tonight.
How are you handling this as an editor? Because I'm assuming, you know, you'll be pro-freedom of speech. This is a university. There's a tradition of protests on campuses. It's part of democracy, isn't it? How do you balance that with the fact that many people not involved, many students not involved in these protests are having their lives utterly disrupted and their educations?
Yeah, well, it's been a difficult evening for us, actually, because one of our reporters was tear-gassed on site this evening and had to be removed from the situation. We had to withdraw a number of our reporters because we thought that there was a serious danger to their safety. One of my colleagues as well was punched by protesters, we don't know from whom, on Sunday morning, clashes that were, by the most part, peaceful as well. So it's been very, very difficult from a reporting perspective for us to be able to tell the news and break the news on campus as we'd normally want to do.
Okay, Dylan Winwood, we're going to come back to you when we hear some more, but thank you for your coverage and giving us some insight from near the scene there. We'll be following the pictures. We'll have some more live pictures for you coming up as well.
problem. But also, people forget even part of the Constitution where there's an exception which calls for a time, place, and manner restrictions on certain protests. You just don't have carte blanche that you just can do it forever and however you want to do it. The Constitution also provides a time, place, and manner restriction. And looking at these scenes across the country, the time, place, and manner restriction is not enforced. Public safety officials have to be careful. Public safety officials, like police officers, can't go in because they need the charge and the task and approval from the mayor, you know, to say, okay, it's okay to go there. So basically, law enforcement hands are tied to going in and protect life and property, which we normally do. So until they give the order, then we get a chance to go in there. But the way it's going now, it's like totally out of control. It's going to take a lot to get things under control. And then after that, we're going to have to see what happens. So, for example, just to bounce back a little bit to New York City, if they don't lock people up for murders, what makes you think they're going to lock people up or any punishment for people who are protesting? It's not going to happen. So if we want some sort of law and order, you have to let the police be the police. You have to back them, not throw them under the bus and go out there and do something, and then you're not backing them, because then we back to square one again. You're going to have the protests just going on, and you're going to tie the hands of the police officers.
So when it comes to UCLA, we're hearing you say that the order needed to come down from Karen Bass to get the LAPD onto the UCLA campus. Notable there.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
When it comes to Columbia, because we also want to talk to you about that, the official word came out that the NYPD was going to be moving into the Columbia campus to clear people out of this Hamilton building. And it came down by NYPD Deputy Director Kaz Daughtry, posted on X. Columbia has requested our assistance to take back their campus, which has been disturbing, which has seen disturbing acts of violence, forms of intimidation, and destruction of property. And then, Oscar, Fox News confirmed with the NYPD that police used at least 4 what they call distraction devices, which are typically light sound devices like flashbangs or powder charges in a canister to clear the agitators out of Hamilton Hall. Can you tell us about that strategy, that tactic, and what all of that means?
Well, it's a great strategy, because what happens is you have to throw people off guard. You have to provide some sort of surprise attack to get them to move another way or thinking about something else. So this way you could go in and you can extract them and you could get in, and you were able to get them out peacefully. You couldn't go straight up head to head because of the fact that so many things were blocked off, so many different things were locked off. So just like that, you have to use other type of tactics to be able to go in there to divert them or have them looking another way so that you could go in there and make the arrest. This is something that NYPD does, and as you can see, we were able to get people out in a peaceful way, but throw them off track and be able to go in there and let the police be the police. You know, like I said, so many times, you know, you tie our hands, and then at the end, when something then blows up, then you run to us, you say, go in, go in, go in. When if you let us do it in the beginning and support us, then a lot of things could be in order, and you could have peace on both sides when you allow us to do this. But when you don't, and you make us more reactive as opposed to proactive, that's where we have a lot of issues that are taking place. The police want to do their job. This is what we do. Yeah. But if you don't, if you tie our hands, we can't do anything.
That's such a great point, because we've seen in areas where the law enforcement has been allowed to come in right at the outset. We don't see these scenes because, quite frankly, Dr. Odom, the people that are at these protests, they're weak individuals. They're not strong. They're not tough. They're weak-minded, sad individuals who are going to cower at the first sign of real obstruction in their faces. What's happening right now at UCLA is not that. There is no police presence, and as a result, you're seeing the scene get out of control. But I want to combine these two scenes and look to the future, Dr. Odom, because as you mentioned, New York City, we don't prosecute the murderers, and these individuals that we showed being arrested, we know are going to be out on the streets if they're not out on the streets already. So do you worry that we will see scenes like we're seeing in Los Angeles right now be repeated in New York City today, at Columbia, at NYU, at City College, sort of looking at UCLA as an inspiration, if you will, especially when these individuals really don't have any true consequences for what they did at Columbia all day yesterday if they're already back out on the streets?
No doubt about it. So I definitely have concern for the campuses here. I'm happy that NYPD is on alert, and hopefully people will wake up and allow the police department to be proactive and to do their jobs in order to prevent this type of chaos. And also, once again, from a legal standpoint, there's a time, place, and manner restriction on free speech. Free speech is not absolute. People must realize that it's not absolute. Yes, in the Constitution, but it also says that there can be time, place, and manner restrictions on it. And I worry about the agitators, the people from the outside, because they are able to blend in. And then when they blend in, they can cause all different types of havoc. They can cause a domino effect with doing this. If there's any sleeper cells, so to speak, now is the time for them to observe and possibly do whatever they think they're going to do, because there's so much chaos and there's no law and order. So I worry about them infiltrating. I worry about these extra bodies outside coming in and doing something. We have to be on alert.
Speaking of no law enforcement, Dr. Odom, back to Columbia. Incredible statement came out yesterday from a Columbia University classics professor. His name is Joseph Howley, and he was critical of Columbia's president. A lot of people, especially on the right, are calling for her to step down, saying that she's the problem. Maybe she's not the problem, because this professor said that he was angry that police were called in originally a couple weeks ago to clear the protesters out. And then the statement reads, NYPD presence in our neighborhood endangers our entire community. Armed police entering our campus places students and everyone else on campus at risk. The statement goes on from there. So if you want answers as to how we got here, Dr. Odom, maybe that's it. This is coming from a Columbia University professor.
Yes. So, you know, the weird thing with that statement is normally you call us when you think you need us. But what about everybody else? What is going on? Because then they would be the first to criticize that if something happened on their campus and agitators was there and they blended in and so much chaos like some of them did, then you would say, where's NYPD? They're not doing their job. My taxpaying dollars are paying for you to do this and you're not doing this. So, you know, the police department, we're not puppets at all. We're the first line of defense. You call us when we need you. We don't call you, you call us. So if you call us and you ask us to do something and it's lawful and we receive the order, we go out there to protect life and property. So you called us. We didn't call you to say we want to do this. You called us and we came in and we did what we were trained to do. NYPD is the best police department in the world and the largest. We go all over the world to help people to restore law and order or to address issues from intelligence to riots to rescues to disasters. We do it all. So remember, you call us. Police don't pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, you think you need me over there? You call us. And when you call us, we do what we are taught and trained to do. And as you can see from the incident in Columbia, we did it in a professional manner. It was peaceful. We were able to stop it. We was able to clear it out. We was able to restore law and order. We were able to restore peace and also get some of the agitators rounded up in that bunch. So we did what we were trained to do, and we came in there and we came in there professionally. And you could also, you know, they talk to one side, but you need to talk to the other side, the people who were protected, the people that were glad that people who caused these different issues were arrested. Now it's in the court's hands. We did what we were supposed to do. Now it's up to the courts. So if the courts let them back out again, that's not our issue. We did what we were supposed to do. And if you call us again, and we will come in there and we will do what we need to do to restore law and order and peace so everybody could do what they need to do in a peaceful manner. That's what it's about. It's not taking sides. It's peaceful manner. That's what we want to do and restore law and order. That's what NYPD does.
Dr. Oscar Odom, thank you for your time this morning. We appreciate it. Let's bring in Jonathan T. Gilliam, former FBI agent, special agent, and a Navy SEAL. And Jonathan, we are just getting breaking news into the newsroom. The latest reporting out of Los Angeles. UCLA police are preparing for a multi-agency operation to secure the campus of UCLA during the protest. But there's also another caveat, a statement from what appears to be a University of California PD chief saying the following. So presumably those are the officers that are on campus, security on campus. Quote, we only had about 5 or 6 officers working tonight. In order for additional resources, it requires multiple agencies, they're preparing to go in and render the location safe. From a law enforcement perspective, from a planning and preparation perspective, just how negligent was UCLA, LA Mayor Karen Bass, and Governor Gavin Newsom, for that matter, with regard to what we're seeing, these horrific scenes out of UCLA tonight?
Well, I would say the same thing for all of these different locations where they have to react instead of taking action before these individuals get onto these campuses. In the case of LA, I think that is the greatest example of failure out of all of these, but by no means is it alone in failure. The NYPD, your previous guest, I enjoy everything he has to say about the NYPD, but they're governed by a leftist mayor in New York City and a police commissioner that doesn't apparently know what they're doing. So they don't stop these things from occurring. Even in Texas, where everybody says they handle things differently in Texas. Well, they handle them pretty much the same in the fact that they allowed these leftists and Islamic fundamentalists, which is called the Red-Green Alliance, and people need to start looking at this. They've allowed these individuals to play their games on college campuses and about something that they've convinced everybody is about the Palestinian people and their freedom. But in reality, this is Hamas. Hamas is Iran, and Iran wants the elimination of all the Jews in Israel and Israel as a state. And ultimately, that's what these people are supporting, whether they realize it or not. And that's what law enforcement and these city officials are allowing to occur on these college campuses.
Yeah, and this was by design by Hamas dating back some 30 years ago, where they asked themselves in a meeting that took place, and the FBI actually, Jonathan, has tape of it. They wiretapped the meeting, and they have tape of Hamas leaders saying, how are we going to speak to the young American minds? Well, let's infiltrate the college campuses, starting with the professors. And you see that very scene unfolding on your screen right now. A seed that was planted 30 years has now sprouted into this. So also on Columbia, Jonathan, one of our reporters asked one of the pro-Palestinian protesters, if police come here and end up handcuffing people and you guys get arrested, what's going to happen? Listen to what the protester responded. She said, we'll do what we've always done. We'll get arrested just like the criminals in the subways. They're always right back out in 24 hours. I mean, they're thinking, well, we get arrested, but there aren't really going to be any consequences.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was on Jesse Waters' show earlier in the evening when that was when that individual was interviewed, and the first thing that popped into my head was the fact that this guy has done this before. Well, these protests haven't been around that long. So this individual was talking about people who protest professionally because of altruism and their belief that they're going to go in and destroy whatever system is that they don't like. So that individual, along with many of the other people at Columbia University and all these universities, are not only trained in what to say and what to do, but they've done it before, and they have no worries because of the way law enforcement and the way that these cities consistently and continuously confuse freedom of speech with intimidation, with force and violence, which is almost exactly what the definition of terrorism is. They confuse that with freedom of speech. And nowhere in the First Amendment is violence, are threats, and intimidation protected. Those are not protected pieces of speech in the First Amendment. And law enforcement needs to realize this.
Jonathan T. Gilliam, we appreciate your time and your insight this morning. Thank you very much. And we just got confirmation from the Associated Press that riot police have moved in to the UCLA campus there in Westwood, California. We will bring you the very latest when we come back. Fox and Friends first, 5 a.m. hour, 5 minutes away. Don't go anywhere.
Imagine a future where plastic is not wasted,